Good morning, good morning, good morning. I love my nativity set. I wanted to buy a nice nativity set like this my whole life. And I did about last year, about this time. But if you look closely at the poor little donkey, someone broke in and broke his ear off. And just like this statue of Maria, that happened back in San Pedro in Los Angeles, and the hand was left on the floor right beneath her. So if you look closely, this hand is very clearly severed with like a pair of scissors. The hand was perfectly good on the other side. It had been bought at a 99-cent store just a few months prior to having the hand chopped off. So when I saw this donkey, they always replicate the same types of behaviors. So when I saw this poor little donkey missing his ear, I figured it would be on the floor, probably right here, like the hand of Maria was. But it was actually located over here, right behind the tree. Now, mind you, when I purchased this, all I did was take it home in a very, very protective styrofoam case where each and every figurine was put into a styrofoam cutout. And then it had a styrofoam lid and then the box. And then I set everything up the same day I brought it home. And this thing has not been touched in a year until someone broke his ear off and put it behind the tree. Yesterday, when I came home from running an errand, the store was unlocked. So it's always about leaving little signals that they were here. And pretty much I cannot leave my apartment without someone coming in and breaking things, rearranging things, unlocking doors, and letting me know that they were here. It's very, very frustrating. You know, and the two permanent questions that always seem to come back at you is, who is this? And why is it happening to me? Right now, the music, little child's nursery rhymes are going right next door. What kind of grown individual listens to like a music box with a little ballerina on top? Makes no sense, really, that a grown man in his late 30s would be listening to a music box like that. So, my goodness, you know, I'm kind of at the point where I just want to fly low and avoid the radar, you know? Because, like, I have an errand to run, and I'm not looking forward to coming home and finding another thing broken apart. This cute little deer's ear was found broken off and found right here. You know, at least I'm not losing. But the two questions that always come up is, who's doing it? When did it start? And the who's doing it, I have maybe 2 or 3 ideas, but some people say, you know, it's because like you move into a new community and you piss someone off in that community. But I hadn't even moved in here when it started. I'd only been here about 4 or 5 days when it started. And I didn't know what was going on. And I wanted to supplement my no contact family, narcissistic family cult, with a new family in the church congregation. that was my downfall, wanting to have a family. And so I, right away in the church, I was talking to a woman after Mass, and it turned out she was the wife of a deacon. And then she says, "Oh, stay here a minute. My husband will be here. I want to introduce you." And right away, he suggests me joining two different groups. One's a men's group, and I didn't understand that was an invitation into this drama. And immediately wanted to get information on me. And like an idiot, I give out my YouTube channel where I talk about, at that time I talked a lot about paranormal things that were taking place in my home for 3 years in this beautiful little house that was built in 1910, like a block and a half from the beach. It was just so cool. That's why I tolerated extreme, crazy demonic activity every day and every night, and these extreme stalkers that were vandalizing my car, motorcycle, and house every week. Not one single week went by. But now I start to think back, okay, so I knew it was there 3 years before I moved here, and I've been here for 3.5 years almost. But was it beforehand? And I thought about how this African American family were pretty much like given a green light on me, because I had lived there for like 6 years with no problems with this African American family. But then it was like a light switch turned on, and they actually started physically assaulting me. And when I would call the cops, they would say, well, the person's not home right now. There's nothing we can do. And I'd be like, I know her name. I know where she lives. And I have a bruise on my face. Why aren't you taking a picture? Why aren't you taking notes and coming back at a different time? This is physical assault. I'm a professional. I have a clean record, totally criminal free. Where's the help? And you just seeing that they're not willing to help you. And so it looks like it was going on in that household. And then there was this weird spiritual thing taking place with this neighbor beneath me, who also happened to be a black woman. And she could tell what I was doing in my apartment complex. I don't want to go into the details, but she would throw temper tantrums, extreme, crazy temper tantrums with slamming doors and banging the ceiling whenever I engaged in one activity. I don't want to go any more into depth in it, but it was like, how is she knowing? Because this activity, there's no way that she should be able to notice. There was no audio, there was no visual. She wouldn't be able to notice. But for some way or another, she always knew, and she always threw a temper tantrum. So that's really bizarre. And that went on the entire 8 years I lived there. And so I go back to the apartment complex before that. And I had this extremely angry, mean person living right next door in an apartment complex right next door. Now, this was the landlord of this apartment complex, like maybe 5 units. He and his wife lived in the bottom unit. I'm sure he's passed on by now, because this was, about 15, 16 years ago. But I lived there for 8 years. And he was extremely old, mean, and angry. And my kids, there was a hedge running in between his apartment complex and mine. And he would come out and yell at my kids when they were just like playing with little figurines on the sidewalk on my side of the hedge. And he would yell at my kids when I wasn't there. Or even if I was there, he'd yell at me, "Get your kids out of here." I was like, what's wrong? Well, they're making noise and they're on my property. Well, they're not making noise and they're not on your property. So anyways, I ended up having my cat being fed rat poison. I can't prove he was fed it, But this cat had survived in the middle of Los Angeles, living indoor, outdoor for 22 years. And this cat was extremely savvy. And I don't think he would have eaten rat poison on his own. But this guy may have coated it in honey or something. I think this, because he was always complaining about my cat too, that would go indoors and outdoors and saying it hides underneath my car. And so, but they didn't even rent out one single apartment. And the wife was always asking me to forgive her husband's behavior and stating that he had been through a lot, but we can have this whole apartment complex and have no one living here because everything irritates him. And he's got millions of dollars, some inheritance or something. So, I think back about that, and I was always targeted in my school psychology, which I did for 28 and a half years for Los Angeles Unified. I was always targeted. And sometimes I would move districts and get a new boss that didn't know about their targeting yet. And it would be a beautiful, wonderful honeymoon until 4 or 5 or 6 months went by, and then that light switch would go on. And you'd see that behavior and being targeted and being treated differently totally kick in. The same behavior that I just ran from the previous unit. Thank God they had these different units. But this one boss was the main guy that would initiate all of this. He would smear me to the new boss. And he even followed me. Once I transferred to a new district and I had like the 6-month honeymoon period until the new boss. And then he ended up taking over that unit. And this was the main guy behind all of it. And then I go all the way back into childhood, where this family ranch we had in the Malibu Mountains, like 365 acres on Canaan Dune and Mulholland. And we were always surveyed by the helicopters, constantly, almost without fail. Every single day, this helicopter would be circling us and observing us. And I just wrote that off to, we would hunt on the land and we weren't supposed to. But, my father's attitude was like, this is the way it's always been in this land. This has been owned by my father since the early 40s, and it wasn't, disallowed back then. But now they say, no, you can't do it. And who are they to tell me what I can do on what I can't do on my land? And we wouldn't kill deer where you need a tag for it. We would just kill 3 things. We'd go hunting for dove, quail, and rabbit. And we would prepare them and eat them for dinner. So I always just thought it was just that, But they would come on our land regularly too. Just unannounced, they would just show up at the house. And the funniest thing is, my dad had a bunch of shotgun shells on the front of the Jeep. And he had one box of shotgun shells in his hand when he saw the ranger approaching us. And he just put the box behind his head and stepped to the end of the Jeep so they couldn't see the shotgun shells on the front of the Jeep, and started having a conversation with the guy while he's holding the box of shells behind his back. And the guy's asking about shooting. My father's, no, we haven't done any shooting here recently, no. Yeah, he's got the shotgun shells in his hand, and there's all these boxes of shotgun shells on the front of the Jeep, which is literally like 6 feet from where this ranger's standing. And I even think about, like, in the 2nd grade, Mrs. Blue told during a parent conference, like the only one my mother ever went to at the end of 1st grade, told her that I was a wild animal. And, I possibly could have been, because there was no really restraints on behavior. Unless you broke something, then you got a whooping. But, there was no real verbalized expectations. There was no verbalized parameters of any way, shape, or form in my childhood growing up. So I may have been a wild animal, I don't know. But apparently I got punished for it, because in 2nd grade I was put in a second grade with only 5 second graders and like 25 first graders. And we, all the second graders, me and Thomas and these other 3 kids, were sat at one table, and they said, we'll always give you different stuff, different material than the first graders. But that, you know, they weren't willing to put forth the effort to really teach us differently, even though they said they would. And so we basically repeated first grade. And then at the end of second grade, they told me that they were going to possibly retain me. And I was basically, you know, I was a victim, and I was told that I was the perpetrator in this scenario and that I would be punished by being retained. And so I did everything I could to improve my reading level, and I wasn't retained. But that was really, really strange, you know, on how that whole scenario was done. It's like, well, if you see me falling behind, help me. Don't put me in a first grade classroom and just make me repeat first grade and then blame me for being behind. So it's like, I can't figure out who's doing this or even when it started. But, you know, and then even before that apartment complex, when my kids were, when I moved there, my kids were only like 4 and 5. And when I lived in Marina del Rey in Los Angeles, that was more like 5 years, it was pretty copacetic. But when the person above me moved out, they moved in this African-American male that just practically just destroyed everything by just purposefully going out of his way to create crazy noise day and night, night and day. And especially when he would come home drunk, he would regularly, at least twice a week, sometimes 3 nights a week, he would come home really, really drunk at like 1 or 2 in the morning. And all hell would break loose with the amount of noise he would make. You know, when you really think back and you think about how many people you've had that live above you in apartments that are very clearly out to take your peace. I have it now. I had it at the last apartment that I lived up here where I'm living now in this state for a year and a half. At the last, it's funny, whenever I make these videos, this person goes completely silent up above, which makes me think he's listening to everything I say and do. But at the last apartment complex, I've never met anyone that was so hell-bent on creating as much noise as possible all day. It's like she never left, even all the way up till usually about 1 o'clock at night. And I only went up there to ask her, you know, what's wrong, like once. And she was so abrasive and just slammed the door in my face when I was very congenial and going, you know, what's wrong with all of the moving the furniture every day and dropping furniture every night? That's not happening. And I'm here with my mother. How dare you come up here and say that? Slam. But, you know, it's really to take your peace and to shut you up. And the way these things of mine are treated, it makes me like literally never want to leave my apartment complex. So what I do try to do is, a lot of times I'll just leave my phone when I walk my dog. But then you're leaving a device where if you get accosted by someone out in society, you could possibly film them, because it seems like nothing's believed these days unless you have some video footage, especially if you're a targeted individual and the cops are in on it. And like, I've been strategically placed within all these people that never leave the apartment complex, you know. And so I got to think that these are the people that would be most convenient to employ to break in and break things and rearrange things and so on and so forth. Because how do they always seem to know my comings and goings? Unless they're one of these individuals that never ever leaves. I mean, you know, it's really, really bizarre how many people in 2025 never leave their apartment. You know, you can do everything through DoorDash and through having packages sent to you, but not if you're a targeted individual. As I've said, out of 7 items ordered to be mailed to me, I've only gotten 2. And these are stuff that they say was delivered on this date at this time. And then you go to the apartment management, we don't know what you're talking about. And you're just kind of, you know, I don't know how many more videos I'm going to take on this, because I got to make it to the end of my lease. And they're trying to find a reason to say I broke the lease, kick me out, and charge me all of those. Because what they, obviously, if you break the lease, they demand that you pay all the rent that was due. So if they can kick you out 5 months before your lease is up, they can try to charge you, let's say you're paying $1,000 a month. They can try to charge you $5,000. And then every apartment I ever moved out of, except for one, the one on La Tierra in Westchester, every other one, when I move out, they lie and they put on all these penalties. They say you ruined the rug and so on. And so that's why when this rug started falling apart like 3 months ago, I gave them pictures, the landlord, and sent them a work order. When I was out of town, they called me and said, do we have permission to go in your apartment to look at this rug? And I said, yes. So I gave permission for people to come in my absence, and no feedback ever since. I've never heard anything regarding it ever since. And so that's just the way it goes, you know. Just last week, as I shared, this person cussed me out again and yelled in my face when I didn't yell. I didn't treat him disrespectful in any way. And I get this very threatening letter saying, we're thinking about breaking your lease if you ever take someone's peace from them again. Isn't that funny? And they would I pretty much stopped going to church. So I hate to say it, but I feel like they're winning. Just because I kind of just don't want to keep playing this game and keep having, but so much of it is kind of teaching you to do what the Lord says. The Lord says, don't be attached to your possessions, material possessions, right? And the Lord, we're even instructed to give praise and rejoice in all circumstances. And so we're really not supposed to complain about little things that transpire that are difficult for us to go through. We're supposed to just go into prayer and take it to the Lord. But, we're all human. And yes, He will frequently give you some consolation in those times. And I've had extreme weird noises pumped in 2 nights in a row only when I was falling asleep. And so just because I had reached that kind of level where I was like, Lord, I need a break from this. Let me come up for air. And He'll pull back. The Lord will pull back on how much tactics these gang suckers are used when you're at your wit's end. But it's only a momentary reprieve before the Lord feels that you're now a little bit more capable of tolerating it again, and then it starts up again. So, it's just it's like being on a Ferris wheel and you want to get off, but it's not your turn to get off. The Ferris wheel, they got the next designated chair. Even though it's still going in the circle, they know who the next person is that they're going to let off. And it's designated. And then they stop for that little chair and they let those 2 people off and 2 new people come on. but they're not going to let you off until it's your turn to get off. And I just feel like yelling down to the little carny, the carnival guy that has the lever, hey, I want to get off now, you know? I'll tip you $5 or $10 when you let me off early, you know, because I'm a little nauseous, you know. I've kind of had this Ferris wheel up to here. So, Jimbo or Billy Bob, whatever your name is, let me off and I'll tip you a little bit, right? Just for your trouble. I'm kind of at that point. It's not that I'm weak. It's just that, you know, don't feel like this is bragging, but I've had a very difficult life. And I feel like if you could make a case for saying I've been targeted my entire life. And maybe my father was targeted because he never filed taxes once in his life, and he did a hell of a lot of illegal stuff. But if you can stay through it and you can let these experiences teach you what you're supposed to, I think it is part of the Lord shaping you, using evil for your good. And then also these evil people observing you, you know, they were told terrible things about you. And like 8 months into it, this person's sitting in his room observing you day and night, night and day, and they don't see anything that they've been told about you. So you can start to win over some of these people. So you can make some of your enemies better by them seeing your example and them coming full circle to think, why do I need to fit in with all these evil people that are targeting innocent people? And also to help yourself to be willing to, you know, let physical possessions go, let your physical possessions be mistreated, and to not really complain. But with this channel, and someone told me, go on that alternative homestead. A couple people have mentioned that channel, and I watched a few of those videos this morning. But, you know, and someone in the comments even said, I think she's making it worse with how she's always challenging them. And she even mentions the sheriff, Daniel Hayes, and how she won't be voting for him again, and calls them losers, and so on and so forth. So in a way, she's kind of throwing fuel on the fire, or lubricating those wheels of abuse. And then yesterday I had a comment person say, you know, I'm trying to look at how I might be feeding into this inadvertently in one way or another. You know, maybe that was a gang stalker leaving that. You know, you never know. Because, you know, I've had channels for 7 years now, and so often you'll get one person that ends up leaving like half of all of your comments. And it's amazing. You know, you have and it's like they get obsessed with you. And a lot of these people are like presenting things that kind of cross boundaries in their comments. And it's to get you to do the same thing narcissists try to do, is to try to get you to explain yourself ad nauseum, you know. And it's like, if you enjoy my content on my channel, you shouldn't be challenging what I say. If you think I'm a delusional, just stop watching. If you think I'm making stuff up, just stop watching. You know, but these people will constantly be kind of saying, well, I disagree, I agree with a lot of what you say, but I disagree with this, because this obviously can't be the case for A, B, and C. And then you already made a case for, you know, what you feel, and they're contradicting it. So you just kind of should leave it there. You know, it's like, well, I made my case in the video, you made your case in the comment, all good. I shouldn't have to be like baited into writing paragraphs like they did in their comment and saying, you know, come on, bite, take the carrot, you know, and respond. Because I don't want to be, that's what narcissists try to get you to do. They try to corner you and get you to explain yourself 24/7. And even on the same subject matter, when they've heard you given the rationale 3, 4, 5 times, they still bring it up. You know, one of the final nails in the coffin with me was them always saying that I was lying about these medical conditions that were actually causing me to be bedridden. And they're always gaslighting me and saying, you know, insinuating that I was making the whole thing up. And it started happening with my stepfather. Every time I'd see him, he'd ask me the same question. You know, so what was it that they actually diagnosed you with? That you ended up having to live here, being bedridden, and us taking care of you for 2 weeks? And then my mom would chime in, oh yeah, wasn't that nice how good of care I took of you? Narcissists are always trying to, you know, reignite that, yes, I appreciated that. I've said it 1,001 times, how I appreciated that. But here you're asking me to kind of appreciate you again for that. So thank you once again for those 2 weeks of where you prepared meals for me. And you know, I don't know how many times I should thank you for this, but once again, since you seem to need it here in this moment, thank you very much for those 2 weeks. You know, one of the worst things with narcissists is when they cause, like, those physical ailments were caused by narcissists, not just in my family, but at work. And I was bedridden because of the amount of abuse I was going through. And then they start rubbing salt in the wounds by saying you're making that up. You know, don't ever get sick if you're with a narcissist. You know, they hate you to death. That's a lot of times the first time people see the mask fall is when they become bedridden or when they're facing some health problems and they need to rely on their significant other that might be a narcissist, or they need an errand to be run to Kinko's. I mean, I was totally bedridden, and I, you know, asked a narcissist, a family member, to just take this paperwork to Kinko's for me. You know, and this person on the phone just went off on me. Here I am, bedridden, totally being abused by my bosses at work, by my family members, one of which this person was one of the primary abusers. And you're asking, this would literally take, and this person was going to work. So it would literally be like, you know, a couple minutes and it was on the way to their work. You know, why is this person so mean and angry that I'm asking for this little tiny insignificant favor? So I don't really know where I stand on making videos on this topic because I don't want to add fuel to the fire. I'm getting tired of my figurines' ears being broken off. Getting tired of, I don't even want to mention all the other stuff that's happening, all the fish that are being killed. I don't even want to mention it because it's like, okay, that irritated him. You know, they watch all my videos. Okay, that irritated. So tomorrow, go do more of what he showed was irritating him. Now I have my temperature greatly increased in this apartment complex to where it's like unhealthy because I have to go out in the cold, in the snow, and to go from like 80-degree temperature into 36 degrees temperature isn't really very good or healthy. And I don't want to open my window because I've had, I think, mites put in through the screen in the window, but they come in all the time anyways, so that doesn't really, I just really don't know how to win. And I am a tenacious person. I am someone that doesn't scare easily. You know, but is it really so wrong for wanting what Jesus promised us, which is, my peace I give you, my peace I leave you, or however that phrase goes. That's a promise from the Lord that he wants to give us his peace. But that's not talking about these evil people that'll see that peace and do their best to take it from you. So he's saying, as long as you basically stay in me and I in you, you can rise above anything and maintain your peace above everything. Maybe I'm not at that level yet. But anyways, there's my discussion points regarding this stuff. God bless you. Have a good day.